My name is Sienna, I'm 32, and I've built a life that looks like it belongs on an Instagram grid. I'm a senior publicist at a top-tier talent agency in Hollywood spinning chaos into gold for A-listers and influencers. My husband Eli is a post-production sound editor for indie films, a steady behind-the-scenes guy who's never chased the spotlight. We have 2 kids, Noah and June, who fill our days with crayon drawings and soccer schedules. Our weekends are packed with wine nights at friends' houses in the hills, laughter echoing off mid-century modern furniture. From the outside, it's perfect. But perfection is just a filter, and lately the cracks in mine have been impossible to hide. That night, we were at Tyler and Gia's place, a sleek, glass and concrete dream perched above Sunset Boulevard. Our usual crew was there, friends we've known since our early 20s, back when we were all broke and dreaming big. The room buzzed with inside jokes, stories about client meltdowns, and debates over who tanked harder at the latest awards show. Prosecco flowed, music pulsed, and the city lights glittered below like they were cheering us on. Everyone was in high spirits. Everyone except Eli. My husband, usually the guy with a dry quip or a playlist fix, was a ghost that night. He sat on the edge of the couch, nursing a whiskey eyes locked on the glass like it held some secret I wasn't privy to. No sarcastic jab about my latest influencer crisis. No stepping in when Tyler butchered the Spotify cue. Just silence. Heavy, unshakable silence. At first I brushed it off. Eli's freelance gigs were feast or famine, and I figured another project had fallen through. He'd been pulling late nights, tweaking audio for a low-budget thriller that kept changing its deadline. But as the night wore on, his withdrawal started to grate. I tossed him a few glances, those subtle married couple looks that say, "Come on, show up." He didn't. He just sank deeper into himself, leaving me to carry the conversation, the laughs, the vibe for both of us. And something about that, about being the only one trying, ignited a frustration I'd been swallowing for years. In long-term relationships, the filters come off. Your partner becomes your sounding board, your safe place to vent. But that night, I didn't just vent. I erupted. One of the guys, Nate, was riffing about how his girlfriend banished him to the couch for buying a Tesla instead of a minivan. The room cracked up, and in that moment I turned to Eli, still silent, still staring at the floor, and let it rip. "Jesus, Eli, man up already," I said, my voice slicing through the laughter. "You'd probably collapse if I stopped holding this whole thing together." The words hit like a grenade. I tried to play it off, flashing a smirk to make it seem like a joke for the crowd. A few people let out nervous chuckles, unsure whether to lean into it or look away. But it wasn't a joke. Not really. I meant it, every bitter, cutting word. I was exhausted from juggling our finances, Noah's science fair projects, June's dance recitals, our social calendar, our future. I'd spent years telling myself Eli was my rock, my steady hand. But lately I'd started to wonder, was he steady or just coasting? Was I calling him dependable because he never pushed back? When I piled everything on him, I thought my words would jolt him, wake him up, force him to snap back into the Eli. I fell in love with the one who could match my fire, with a sly grin and a comeback. But they didn't. Eli didn't respond. No witty retort. No Sienna chill. He just looked at me, his eyes holding something worse than anger, disappointment. The kind that makes your chest tighten because you know you've crossed a line you can't uncross. He set his drink down the glass, clinking softly against the coffee table. No rush, no drama. He stood, walked past our friends without a glance, and slipped out the front door. At first I thought he was just stepping out for air, maybe cooling off in the driveway. But 10 minutes passed, then 20. The party kept going, but the energy had shifted. Gia shot me a look, half concerned, half curious. Tyler changed the subject. I laughed too loud, poured another glass of wine, and pretended everything was fine. But inside, I was unraveling. Eli hadn't just left the room. He'd left me, and the weight of that realization hit harder than I was ready for. Eli didn't come home that night, or the next. Our Silver Lake apartment, usually alive with kid chaos and Eli's vinyl records spinning, felt like a museum exhibit frozen too quiet. I told myself he was being dramatic, sulking somewhere, maybe crashing at his brother's place in Echo Park. We'd had spats before. I'd push too far, he'd give me that disappointed look, and we'd hash it out later, usually in the car, sometimes in bed with a clumsy apology that got us back to normal. But this wasn't that. This was silence. Not the kind you can ignore, but the kind that presses against your ribs, demanding to be felt. The morning after the party, I sent him a half-hearted text. "You okay?" Like I hadn't humiliated him in front of people he'd known for a decade. No reply. That night, I tried again, a little softer. "Can we talk?" Nothing. I didn't call, didn't drive around looking for him. Part of me was still clinging to the idea that he'd come back on his own, grumbling, but forgiving like always. Part of me was too proud to chase him. Work didn't help. My job is a pressure cooker, managing egos, dodging tabloid landmines, and keeping clients like pop star Kyla Reese from imploding on social media. That week, Kyla was in the middle of a PR nightmare after a leaked video showed her yelling at a fan. My boss, Vanessa, was breathing down my neck, demanding a miracle rebrand by Friday. I was drowning in damage control, but all I could think about was Eli's face when he walked out. I started snapping at my assistant Priya for small mistakes, misfiled contracts, a missed email. She took it in stride, but I could see her tense up, and it only made me feel worse. Gia brought it up at brunch a few days later over avocado toast at a crowded spot in Los Feliz. "Everything good with Eli?" She asked, her tone careful, like she was stepping around broken glass. I rolled my eyes, forcing a laugh. He's probably off writing poetry about his feelings or something. I wanted it to sound breezy, but it landed flat. Gia didn't smile. She just nodded her lips tight and changed the subject. That nod stuck with me, like she knew something I was too stubborn to see. Then came the real blow. Eli missed Noah's soccer game. He never missed the kids' games. Not for deadlines. Not for flu season. Not even during crunch weeks when he was living on Red Bull and 4 hours of sleep. I stood on the sidelines alone, cheering too loudly, telling the other parents he had a work emergency, but I didn't know where he was. Noah kept glancing at the bleachers, looking for his dad's familiar wave. When he asked me after the game, "Where's Daddy?" I mumbled something about a late edit and changed the subject. The lie tasted bitter. When Eli finally called 4 days later, his voice was a stranger's. Flat, detached. "I need some space," he said, like he was canceling a lunch plan. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. Space." I snapped, my voice sharper than I meant. "From what, Eli? We had a fight. Couples fight. You don't just disappear." "It's not about the fight," he said, and the calm, in his tone, unnerved me. "It's about everything else. I'll call you later." He hung up before I could argue. I stared at my phone, my pulse racing. This wasn't our rhythm. I was the one who pushed, who flared. He was the one who absorbed, who cooled. But now he wasn't absorbing anything. He was gone. Work became a battlefield. Kyla's scandal was spiraling. TMZ had picked up the video, and Twitter was tearing her apart. Vanessa was relentless, piling on meetings and late-night calls, hinting that my job was on the line if we didn't turn it around. I threw myself into the crisis crafting statements, prepping Kyla for a teary Instagram live apology. But every time I paused, Eli's absence crept in. I'd catch myself checking my phone, hoping for a text, a sign, anything. There was nothing. At home, the kids felt it too. Noah grew quieter, retreating to his room with his Switch. June started asking, "When's Daddy coming home?" I'd dodge, with vague promises. But their questions were like needles. I hadn't realized how much Eli anchored us until he was gone. He was the one who handled bedtime stories, who knew June's favorite stuffed animal by name, who could get Noah to open up about school. I was the loud one, the planner, the fun parent. But Eli was the glue. I started cleaning obsessively, scrubbing counters, organizing drawers, anything to keep my hands busy. In one drawer, I found a stack of bills I'd never looked at, all paid, all handled by Eli. In another, I found a birthday card he'd written for me last year, but never gave me the words, simple but heavy. "You're my chaos, and I wouldn't trade it." I sat on the floor holding it and felt the shame settle in. I'd always known how much he carried, but I'd let myself believe I was the one keeping us afloat. Gia called one night, her voice gentle but firm. "Sienna, you need to talk to someone, a therapist maybe. This isn't just about Eli leaving. It's about why you pushed him that far." Therapy. I'd always dismissed it as self-indulgent, something for people with real problems. But Gia's words hit a nerve. The next day, I booked a session with Dr. Patel, a therapist in West Hollywood who specialized in high-stress professionals. It felt like admitting defeat, but I was too tired to care. A week later, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I texted Eli, the kids, "Miss you." Can we talk? It was a cop-out using Noah and June as bait, but I was desperate. He agreed to meet at our old spot, a cozy cafe on Melrose, where we used to steal mornings before the kids, and work swallowed us. I didn't know what to wear. Jeans felt too casual, a dress too try-hard, so I settled on a sweater and sneakers, my hair pulled back. I didn't want to look like I was begging, even though I was. He was there when I arrived, seated by the window, a black coffee in front of him. Eli, always late, always fumbling, was early. That alone felt like a warning. He looked tired, but not broken. There was a steadiness in him I hadn't seen in years. His eyes met mine, calm, but guarded. "Hey," I said, sliding into the chair across from him. "Hey," he replied, his voice neutral. I started to apologize, but he raised a hand, gentle but firm. "Sienna, this isn't about the party." I blinked. "It's not." "No," he said, his voice low, steady, and achingly sad. "It's about all the years before, all the times you cut me down and called it a joke, all the nights I stayed up balancing our budget while you complained I wasn't present, all the times I picked up the kids, handled their meltdowns, made sure they felt safe while you were out saving someone else's career. You always said you were holding us together, but I've been the one keeping us from falling apart." His words landed like stones, each one heavier than the last. I wanted to argue, to spin it, to say he was exaggerating, but I couldn't. Because deep down I knew he was right. The late-night edits he'd do in the garage so I could sleep. The parent-teacher meetings he never missed. The way he'd calm June's tantrums while I was on a call with Vanessa. I'd called him emotionally unavailable to my friends. But he'd been there quietly, always, while I took him for granted. "I didn't mean to hurt you," I said, my voice breaking. "I didn't see it. But you did hurt me," he said, his eyes holding mine. "And you kept doing it." "I can't keep being your punching bag, Sienna. I'm tired." The silence that followed was suffocating. I wanted to cry, to reach for him, but his arms were crossed, his body a closed door. He wasn't angry, he was done, and that was worse. The weeks after that conversation were a blur of survival. Work was relentless. Kyla's apology video went viral for the wrong reasons, and Vanessa was on a warpath. I managed to pull it together, leaning on Priya's quick thinking to pivot Kyla to a charity campaign that softened the backlash. We saved the account, and Vanessa gave me a rare nod of approval, but it felt hollow. No win at work could fill the hole Eli left. At home, the kids' questions grew sharper. "Is Daddy gone forever?" June asked one night, her eyes wide. I lied, said he was just busy, but the truth was eating me alive. I started therapy with Dr. Patel, and it was like peeling back layers of scar tissue. She didn't let me hide behind my usual deflections. "Why do you think you needed to make Eli feel small?" she'd ask. I didn't have answers, not at first, but slowly I started to see it. I'd been so afraid of losing control of my career, my image, my life, that I'd pushed Eli down to feel taller. I started volunteering at Noah's school, helping with the spring fair. It was small, but it felt like a way to show up for my kids the way Eli always had. The other parents were kind, but I felt their pity. Sienna, the high-powered mom, suddenly alone. I didn't correct them. I was too busy trying to correct myself. One night, Gia came over with a rabal of peen. "Opa do." "You're different," she said, studying me, quieter, but stronger maybe. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't feel strong. I felt like I was rebuilding from the ground up. Then one afternoon, I saw Eli at a parent-teacher conference. He was there for Noah's progress report, same as me. We exchanged polite hellos, a nod, but the warmth we used to share gone. He looked good, healthier, lighter, like he'd shed a weight I hadn't realized I'd been. When he left, I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I'd finally accepted it. Eli was healing, and I wasn't part of that anymore. 2 months later, Eli came by to pick up the last of his things. I'd asked him to come when the kids were at my sister's, and he agreed, because that's who he is. Consider it even now. He moved through our apartment with quiet purpose, packing books, vinyls, a few framed photos. I stood in the doorway watching my throat tight. "Eli, please," I said, as he zipped his duffel bag. "Don't do this." He paused, turning to face me. His eyes were softer than I expected, but heavy with finality. "Sienna, I've been doing this for years. This is the first time I'm doing it for me." The words cut deeper than any fight we'd ever had. He wasn't leaving because he didn't love me. He was leaving because loving me had cost him too much. "I don't have anything left," he said, his voice steady. "Not for us? Not for me. I'm sorry." He walked out the door, closing softly behind him. No slam, no shouting. Just the quiet of a man who'd given everything and had nothing left to offer. I stood there frozen, the apartment echoing with his absence. I wanted to scream, to beg, to promise I'd change. But I'd made those promises before, and he'd waited too long for me to mean them. In the months that followed, I tried to keep it together for Noah and June, for work, for the version of myself I'd sold to the world. But every day felt like walking through quicksand. I'd manage Kyla's next crisis smile through client dinners and tuck the kids in with stories I made up on the spot. But at night, I'd lie awake haunted by every time I'd dismissed Eli's efforts, every sarcastic jab I'd thrown, every time he'd looked at me with quiet hurt and I'd turned away. Therapy helped, but it wasn't a cure. Dr. Patel pushed me to face the patterns I'd ignored, my need to control, my fear of vulnerability, the way I'd used Eli as a scapegoat for my own stress. I started journaling not for answers, but for honesty. I volunteered more at the kids' school, showing up in ways I never had before. Noah started talking to me again, little by little. June still asked for her dad, but I learned to sit with her questions instead of dodging them. Gia was right, I was changing. Not into someone new, but into someone who could finally see herself clearly. I wasn't the hero of our marriage. I wasn't the victim. I was the storm, and Eli had been the shelter I'd taken for granted. Sienna and Eli's story is a gut punch for anyone who's ever let love slip through their fingers, not because of a single betrayal, but because of 1,000 small dismissals. In a world where we're all chasing the next win, better job, bigger house, shinier life, it's easy to forget that love doesn't survive on autopilot. It needs care, attention, accountability. Sienna's mistake wasn't cruelty, it was complacency. She assumed Eli's quiet strength meant he'd always stay no matter how many times she made him feel small. She told herself she was the one holding their family together, but in truth, she was the one pulling it apart. One sarcastic remark, one unacknowledged effort at a time. The lesson here is brutal, but clear love isn't just about staying. It's about showing up every day like it matters. It's about listening when it's easier to criticize, apologizing, when it's tempting to deflect, and valuing the person who's been there all along. Because even the strongest people have breaking points, especially the ones who never complain. If you're reading this and thinking it's not that bad, pause. Ask yourself, do I make my partner feel seen? Do I take responsibility for my words, or do I assume they'll just take it? Would I speak this way if I knew it was the last time they'd listen? Because sometimes it is. And by the time you realize it, the door has already closed quietly and for good. Are you showing up for love with intention, or are you banking on someone's patience to carry you through? Don't wait until they're gone to find out what you could have saved.